Hi, my name is Miss Dee Dee Davis, and I'm the Adult Services Librarian at the Vista Grande Library. And we're back with our Lo-Fi Literati meeting here. We're going to do a discussion. This time around, I'm going to be interviewing another Literati member. So I'd like to introduce you to Frank Davis, who looks suspiciously similar to me. So the resemblance is uncanny. This is my father. We'll also be talking about the book The Armada, which is our December book that we picked out for the Literati. And just kind of a heads up, I am deaf, and I will be using a speech-to-text device. So if you see me glancing at my phone, that's what it is. And I also will be reading lips somewhat. So you guys are going to see a lovely profile of me throughout the whole video. And then we'll wrap it up and we'll talk about the next book for January, and we'll have comments, questions in the comments so you guys can respond and chit-chat with. So the Armada, for those of you who are not familiar, is a little bit like Ender's Game. It's a science fiction book based on video games and reality and alien invasion. It's all good stuff. So, Frank, hi, welcome.
Thank you. Joy to be here.
So let's start off with the first questions. I said, some people consider science fiction writers to have an uncanny ability to guess or predict the future. Why do you agree or disagree with that?
I agree with it very much. Hard science fiction, which is what I'm kind of interested in, takes existing science, looks at the history of it, and projects it into the future. A good case of that is Arthur C. Clarke talking about communication satellites 10 years before they became a reality. Shows like Star Trek did extensive evaluation of scientists and engineers to project where they were technology-wise today and where it would likely be several hundred years into the future. So I am very much a fan of that concept that what we see in good science fiction is a possible projections of what reality would be during those time frames that the books or movies take place.
I believe I'm catching up here, so welcome to my life. Okay, so I believe we've had these similar conversations growing up, and you had said once about that the engineers and who create these sort of things are actually already avid science fiction readers or comics. They wrote as a parody to like a satire or their own day and age, what's going on, and then people kind of took it and misinterpreted it, and it blew up into this great science fiction book.
Mm-hmm. Well, as an example of that, Frank Herbert in Dune, his book was based, and he was not a science fiction writer, he was a journalist in Seattle, and his book was a parody, that the spice was a parody of petroleum in our society. He who controlled the petroleum in the world, the oil, controlled the world. And in the book Dune, whoever controlled the spice controlled essentially the known universe at that time. So there is a background for that kind of writing as well.
What scares you the most about video games, computer games, or simulations? Like, what's the big fear for you behind all that?
Well, it desensitizes people to violence. You get in and you think it's not real, and you can take out all there's positives and negatives, I believe. The Japanese used to have these things where you could go into a room and beat the crap out of effigies of their bosses to take out any frustration and anger. And that was supposed to be beneficial to the person. They vent all that anger, they go back and do their job. And I think the video games are like that. You could go in and take out your frustrations and anger against imaginary enemies. But at the same time, it teaches you to be violent. And it is a situation that makes it feel like it's desirable to be able to do these things. And in the science fiction books, it's like people take advantage of that and use it as a method of causing people to participate in wars they don't even know they're fighting. So, I think that's very unethical, but it's a reality. Like now, you're getting rid of all these drones are using remote pilots that don't really have any life-threatening investment in what they're doing. So it's easy to go out and destroy enemies while you're sitting in a place in Nevada with air conditioning, and then go home to the family, and it's a very messed up way of doing things.
My big thing is the disconnect of human touch. There's a lot of other things that have obviously come into play with potential lack of empathy, or that disconnect of humanity. Sometimes when you'll see during the pandemic, what we're in now, you'll see small children who are being raised with the social distancing in the video school, the virtual schools, and I've heard people say that their toddler or 6 or 7 or even 8-year-old doesn't realize that the person on the screen on a Zoom meeting or a Zoom class is a real person. They think it's like an avatar, they think it's like TV, that they think it's pretend, and they're shocked to learn that that's a real person, and the things that they say and do or don't do impact that person who they don't have a physical connection with. So some of the kids were shocked. So there's a lot of things like that where there's that disconnect, and granted they're also young, but if you're growing up that way, I think it's harder to have those social connections, as we noticed during this time. So that's my big thing, is everybody would be too separated, and that kind of human touch factor, they will be lost if everybody's in their own pod doing everything online. So the military sometimes throws people into situations they're not wholly prepared for. How effective do you think the sink or swim strategy is when applied to life?
I was briefly in the Air Force, and my career involved interfacing with the Air Force as an engineer for an aerospace company. And you have to understand the mission of the military. The military mission is to protect our country from all possible conflicts that could occur between countries. So that sort of sets the trend that they are going to be very defensive and aggressive in that protection, and sometimes they overextend their bounds because they become paranoid. Each little thing that comes up, they look at as a possible threat to their own government, and so that's their mindset. And that you can see that in this book, in Armada, that the military leaders, kept secrets from a lot of people because they didn't know who they could trust and to complete their mission, which almost led to their total annihilation of Earth as a result of using that mindset. So it has its plus, but it also has a lot of minuses.
I remember reading an article, any decision you make in life can be decided in under 10 minutes. Is that any major decision, whether to move, to quit your job or anything, it's kind of the sink or swim. When your life is on the line, when it's urgent, you make the decision really quickly and then follow through. Like I said, if you overanalyze, sometimes if you take all this data and you scrutinize things, it kind of leads to analysis paralysis. And I said, a lot of big decisions and a lot of big organizations and institutions should be done in 10 minutes. When you're military, sink or swim, you got to make that decision.
I've heard several 4-star generals make the comment that something called analysis paralysis, that if you start analyzing things without moving forward, you never get anything accomplished. On the other hand, they say any battle plan that they put together is subject to change immediately after the battle starts. So it's a continually updating of priorities, where you're going to go based on the situation that you have to face. It's not an easy way to exist, but it's practically the only way to exist.
Okay, so what would you say or do if you knew that you were going to die tomorrow?
Try to say goodbye to as many people as I could reach. It seems to me that life-ending events never give you the time to do that, especially like wrecks or plane crashes or things like that. Prolonged illnesses is one of them, but by that time as you get close to death, you're so doped up on meds that you probably don't even realize what you're doing. It's rare to have a situation where you can get your family together and tell them, I'm a Christian and I believe that there is a life after this life. And so I don't fear death. I don't look forward to it necessarily, but I think that you're blessed if you have the opportunity to take the time to say goodbye to the people around you that you love.
Okay. I love you, Daddy.
Thank you. Me too, dude.
And then the last question for you is, most people dream of adventure, the dare to be great moment when someone exciting falls in your lap and, you take the reins and you do it. So I would say, tell us one of your own memorable adventures where you're like, I can't believe this is happening. This is fantastic. This is beyond my wildest dreams.
Wow, there were so many. From the time I started, I was very much into athletics, and I had these aspirations of playing professional football. And I was fairly good at it. I was an all-city football player in Oregon, but it just didn't materialize. I wasn't as good as I thought I could be. So then I went into engineering. I applied to be an astronaut, and people laughed at me because the only people that got to be astronauts were people that had military background and very high academic qualifications, which I didn't have. So you have to kind of learn to do whatever you can do and modify your aspirations. At least I found that in my case. Right now, I'm kind of into writing a science fiction, and I really enjoy being able to be part of that community.
Sweet, thank you. Okay, so we're going to kind of wrap up here a little bit. And here, Vanna White, hold this. This is our next book for January. Thank you. Wonderful. It's called The Lost City of the Monkey God by Douglas Preston, who is famous for I think it's called the Pendergast series that he writes with Lincoln Child. And we have all that, by the way. And this is a nonfiction book, though, and it takes place in the Honduran jungle. It's sort of like, it's also an adventure, but it's sort of like the book The Endurance by Shackleton about that trip to Antarctica that the Literati had read a couple of years ago. That was fabulous, by the way. And so this is kind of a similar bent. This actually takes place, this journey was 2012 when we made this excavation. National Geographic, big names. So anyways, but we're going to read this, and it's kind of a semi-biography, and it's got really good reviews. It came out a couple of years ago, and we'll be looking into that next month. So thank you for joining us, and I'll leave the other questions for Armada in the comments section if you guys want to respond and start a dialogue, and we can go over that. So thank you so much. We'll see you next month.